Hello everyone, welcome to the new episode of AG104 examination preparation content. We are working on configure and manage virtual networks for Azure administrators. We have completed chapters virtual networks, network security groups, Azure DNS. Today we'll be exploring Azure Virtual Network peering. Configure Azure Virtual Network peering. So in this module, identify usage cases and product features of Azure Virtual Network peering. Configure your network to implement Azure VPN Gateway for transit connectivity. Extend peering by using hub and spoke network with user-defined routing and service chaining. Azure Virtual Network lets you connect virtual networks in same or different regions. Azure Network peering provides secure communication between resources in peer networks. Suppose your engineering company is migrating services to Azure. The company is deploying services into separate Azure Virtual Network. Private connectivity between virtual network isn't yet configured. Several business units identified services in virtual networks that need to be communicated with each other. So, at that point, we need to configure the network connectivity. So, we will be using virtual network peering. You are responsible for implementing Azure Network Peering solution and enabling connectivity between the virtual networks. Two of your strategy goals include preventing exposure of services to the internet and keeping the integration as simple as possible. Your solution should address transit and connectivity concerns. Determine Azure Virtual Network Peering uses. Perhaps the simplest and easiest and quickest way to connect your virtual network is to use Azure Virtual Network Peering. Virtual network peering enables you to seamlessly connect to two Azure virtual networks. After the network is peered, the two virtual networks operate as a single network for connectivity purposes. Things to know about virtual network peering. Let's examine some prominent characteristics of Azure Virtual Network Peering. There are two types of Azure Virtual Network Peering: regional and global. Regional and global. So this is another region. Regional virtual network peering connects Azure virtual networks in the exact same region. Global network connects the Azure networks in different region. You can create regional peering of virtual networks in the same Azure public cloud region, or in same China cloud region, or in same Microsoft Azure government cloud region. You can create global peering of virtual networks in any Azure public cloud region or in any China cloud region. Global peering of virtual networks in different Azure government cloud regions isn't permitted. Global peering in different Azure government cloud regions is not permitted. After you create a peering between virtual networks, the individual virtual networks are still managed as a separate resources. Things to consider when using virtual network peering. Private network. When you implement Azure Virtual Network Peering, network traffic between peered virtual network is private. Traffic between virtual networks is kept on Microsoft Azure backbone network. No public internet gateways or encryption is required in the communication between virtual networks. Strong performance. Because Azure Virtual Network Peering utilizes the Azure infrastructure, you gain low latency, high bandwidth connection between resources in different virtual networks. Wow. Simplified communication. Azure Virtual Network Peering lets resources in one virtual network communicate with resources in different virtual networks after the virtual networks are peered. Seamless data transfer. You can create Azure Virtual Network Peering configuration to transfer the data across Azure subscriptions, deployment models, and across Azure regions. No resource disruptions. Azure Virtual Network Peering doesn't require downtime for resources in either virtual network when creating the peering or after the peering is created. Determine gateway transit connectivity. When virtual networks are peered, you can configure Azure VPN Gateway in the peered virtual network as a transit point. In this scenario, a peered virtual network uses a remote VPN gateway to gain access to other resource. Consider a scenario where three virtual networks in same regions are connected by Virtual network peering. Virtual network A and virtual network B are in each peered with a hub virtual network. The hub virtual network contains several resources, including gateway subnet and a Azure VPN Gateway. The VPN Gateway is configured to allow VPN Gateway transit. Virtual network B access the resources in the hub, including the gateway subnet, by using remote VPN gateway. Virtual network A, virtual network B, these are peer and they are accessing using VPN gateway. Great. Things to know about Azure VPN Gateway. Let's closer look at how Azure VPN Gateway is implemented in Azure Network Virtual Peering. A virtual network can have only one VPN gateway. So one VNet, one VPN gateway. Gateway transit is supported for both regional and global virtual network peering. When you allow VPN gateway transit, the virtual network can communicate to the resource outside the peering. In our simple illustration, the gateway subnet gateway within the hub virtual network can complete tasks such as use site-to-site VPN to connect to on-premises network, use VNet to VNet connection to another virtual network, use point-to-site VPN to connect to a client. When you allow VPN gateway transit, the virtual network can communicate to the resources outside the peering. In our sample illustration, the gateway subnet gateway within the hub virtual network can complete tasks such as gateway subnet. Where is the gateway subnet? I think this is the gateway subnet. Use a site-to-site VPN to connect to on-premises network. Okay, site-to-site VPN here will be there. Okay, VNet to VNet connection to another virtual network. Virtual network to virtual network. Okay. Use point-to-site VPN to connect a client. Gateway transit allows peered virtual network to share gateway and get access to the resources. Within this implementation, you don't need to deploy VPN gateway in the peered virtual network. Okay. You can apply network security groups in a virtual network to block and allow access to other virtual networks or subnets. When you configure virtual network peering, you can choose to open or close the network security group rules between the virtual networks. Create a virtual network peering. Azure Virtual Network Peering can be configured for virtual networks by using PowerShell, the Azure CLI, and the Azure portal. In this module, we review the steps to create peering. Things to know about creating virtual networks peering. To implement virtual network peering, your Azure account must be assigned to the network contributor or classic network contributor role. Alternatively, your Azure account can be assigned to custom role that can complete the necessary peering actions. For details, see these permissions. To create peering, you need two virtual networks. The second virtual network in the peering is referred to as a remote network. Initially, the virtual machines in a virtual network cannot communicate with each other. After peering established, the machines can communicate with peer network based on your configuration settings. Let's see what they say.
Global VNet peering enables you to connect Azure Virtual Network seamlessly with a private. There you go.
Really, so just for that check initiated state. And so what we did is at least.
How to check your paging status? In the Azure portal, you can check the connectivity status of the virtual networks in virtual network peering. The status condition depends on how virtual networks are deployed. Your peering isn't successfully established until both virtual networks in the peering have the status of connected. For deployment with Azure Resource Manager, the two-party primary status conditions are initiated and connected. For the classic deployment model, the updating status condition is also used. When you create initial peering to the second virtual network from the first virtual network, the peering status for the first network is initiated. When you create the subsequent peering from the second virtual network to the first network, the peering status for both first and remote virtual network is connected. In the Azure portal, you can see the status for the first virtual network change from initiated to connected. Extend peering with a user-defined routes and service chaining. Let's see. Virtual network peering is non-transitive. I mean, the communication capabilities in a peering are available to only the virtual networks and resources in the peering. Other mechanisms have to be used to enable traffic between to and from resources and networks outside private peering network. Suppose you have two virtual networks ABC. You establish network peering between AB, also between BC. You don't set up peering between A and C. The virtual network peering capabilities that you set up between network B and C don't automatically enable peering communication capabilities between A and C. Things to know about extending peering. There are a few ways to extend capabilities of your peering resources to virtual networks outside your peering network. Hub and spoke, user-defined routing, service chaining. Hub and spoke, user-defined routing, service chaining. You can implement these mechanisms and create a multi-level hub and spoke architecture. These options can help overcome the limit on the number of virtual network peerings as per virtual network. The following diagram shows hub and spoke virtual network with an NVA. What is NVA? And VPN Gateway. The hub and spoke network is accessible to other virtual networks via user-defined routes and service chaining. Okay, the hub and spoke is accessible to other virtual networks via user-defined routes and service chaining. So, hub and spoke implements user-defined routing and service chaining. Virtual network C, virtual network D, user-defined route, VPN gateway, user-defined route, VPN gateway, NVA. Expand table. What is this? Okay. Hub and spoke network. When you deploy hub and spoke network, the hub virtual network can host infrastructure components like a network virtual appliance. Okay, NVA means network virtual appliance, and Azure VPN gateway. All spoke virtual networks can then peer a hub virtual network. Okay, they can peer with the virtual network. Traffic can flow through NVAs or VPN gateways in the hub virtual network. User-defined route. Virtual network peering enables the next hop in a user-defined route to be the IP address of the virtual machine in the peered virtual network or VPN gateway. The virtual network peering enables the next hop in a user-defined route. The next hop in a user-defined route to be the IP address of the virtual machine in the peered virtual network. Okay, or a VPN gateway. Okay. Service chaining. Service chaining lets you define the UDRs. Okay. These routes direct traffic from one virtual network to a network, virtual appliance, or VPN gateway. Interactive lab simulation. Amazing, man. There are two offices, New York and Boston, in one region. There is one office in Seattle and another region. All the offices need to be networked together so they can share information. So this is the architecture diagram. This is region 1 and this is region 2. Seattle is another region, so this must be Seattle, I think. This is New York and Boston. So they have their own separate virtual networks, AZ104 VNet 0, and this is a VNet 1, and this is VNet 2. Okay, this is global peering, and this is local peering, and this is global peering. Right? Objectives. The simulation focuses on connectivity of the offices and not creating the individual Azure resources. Okay. Create the infrastructure environment. In the task, you deploy 3 virtual machines. Virtual machines are deployed in different regions and virtual networks. 1, 2, 3 different VNets, 3 VNets, I think. Use a template to create virtual networks and virtual machines in different regions. You can review the lab template. Use the PowerShell to deploy the template. Great. Configure local and global virtual network pairing. Create a local virtual network pairing between the two virtual networks in the same region. Create a global virtual network pairing between virtual networks in a different region. Test inter-site connectivity between virtual networks on 3 virtual networks. Test the virtual machine connection in the same region, machine connection in the different region. Great.
Welcome to this interactive lab simulation for the lab. To navigate this in this lab, you will complete the tasks listed on your screen. In this first task, you will deploy 3 virtual machines, each into a separate virtual network with 2 of them in the same Azure region and the third one in another Azure region. In the toolbar of the Azure portal, click the Cloud Shell button. Click Show Advanced Settings. With an existing resource group selected, provide names for the storage account and file share. In the toolbar of the Cloud Shell pane, click Upload and upload the loop parameters and loop template JSON files into the Cloud Shell home directory. Open the loop parameters file in the editor and change the password. Save the change. Next, run the commands as shown to deploy the resource group that will be hosting the environment. Close the Cloud Shell pane. This task is now complete. Click the screen. In the Azure portal, search for and select Virtual Network. Verify that the first 2 virtual networks created in the previous. Scroll down. Verify that the first 2 virtual networks created in the previous task are located. Scroll down. Next, select Peerings. Click Add. Provide the information to establish peering between the 2 virtual networks in the East US region. First, provide the peering link name for this virtual network. Next, select the option to block traffic that originates from outside this virtual network. Scroll down. Next, enter the peering link name for the remote virtual network. Select the name of the virtual network. Next, enter the peering link name for the remote virtual network. Select the name. Next, enter the peering. Scroll down. Next, enter the peering link name for the remote Select the name of the virtual network. Again, select the Next, click Add. Provide the information to establish global peering between this virtual network in the East US region and the virtual network. Provide the information to establish global peering. Next, select the. Scroll down. Next, enter the peering link name for the remote virtual network. Select the name of the virtual network. Scroll down. Select the option to block traffic from outside this virtual network, and then click Add. Next, return to the virtual network. Select the second virtual network. Scroll down the left pane and select Peerings. Click Add. Scroll. Select the option. Scroll down. Next, again, select the scroll down.
I'm actually not observing the virtual networks. So the networks got created now. Let me check it from here very carefully.
Verify that the first two virtual networks created in the previous task are located in the same Azure region, and that the third one is in a different Azure region. Select the first virtual network in the East US region.
So we need 0 and 1 from East to US. Okay, I'll select the first network.
Scroll down. Next, select Peer. Click Add. Provide the information to establish peering between the two virtual networks in the East US region. First, provide the peering link name for this virtual network. Next, select the option to block traffic that originates from. Scroll down.
0 to 1 in the same region.
Next, enter the peering link name for the remote virtual network. Select the name of the virtual network.
This is 1 to 0 in the same region. We are making the change in the we need 0 only. Here we have selected VNet 1, right? Previous.
Select the name of the virtual. Next, enter the peering link name for the. Scroll down.
0 to 1. Scrolling down.
Next, enter the peering link name for the remote virtual network. Select the name of the virtual network. Again, select the. Next, click Add. Provide the information to establish global peering between this virtual network in the East US region and the virtual network in the West US region. First, provide the peering link name for this virtual network. Next, select the option to block traffic that originates from outside this virtual network.
So this is VNet 0 to 2. 2 it is in the another region. If you remember, in the here it is asking us to select the peering link name twice, and it is asking the remote VNet name. Here in this section it is not asking. In the next section it will ask the remote VNet name.
Scroll down. Next, enter the peering link name for the remote virtual network. Select the name of the virtual network.
See here remote virtual network peering link name it is asked, and here it is asking for virtual network name.
Scroll down. Select the option to block traffic from outside this virtual network, and then click Add. Next, return to the virtual networks blade. Select the second virtual network in the East US region. Scroll down the left pane and select Peerings. Click Add.
So here already peering got created from the VNet 0 to VNet 1.
Provide the information to establish global peering between the second virtual network in the East US region and the one in the West US region.
So this is also global network peering.
Now click Add. Click Refresh. This task is now complete. Click the screen to continue. In this next task, in the Azure portal, search for and select Virtual Machines. Select the first VM, click Connect, and then select RD. Click Download RDP. Open the file. Click Connect. Sign in, and then start the remote desktop session. Search for and then click Windows PowerShell. Select Run as Admin. In the Windows PowerShell console, run the commands as shown to test connectivity between the two virtual machines. Examine the output of the command. Next, test connectivity between this virtual machine and the one in the other Azure region. Close the RDP session. Navigate back to the virtual machines blade. Select the second VM. Connect with RDP. Open Windows PowerShell. Next, run the commands as shown to test connectivity. Examine the output of the command and verify that the connection was successful. Close the RDP session. This interactive lab simulation is now complete.
So what we did, we created we need local peering, and we created two global peerings. Okay, let's do the knowledge check. Company implementing Azure Virtual Network peering solution to enable connectivity between virtual networks. You are working on a plan to support shared access to gateways and resources, control internet communication. A team submitted questions and configuration requests for your input. The IT team needs information about how to check virtual network peering status and verify peered connections. The marketing department has resources in virtual networks in different regions. Virtual networks are successfully peered. What is peering status for both virtual networks and the peering connected? What approach enables peered virtual networks to share the gateway and get access to the resources? This is what approach? This is called gateway transit. Let's check that. How about virtual network peering best described? Great. Let's see that comments. Gateway transit allows peered virtual network to share gateway and get access to the resources. The Azure backbone handles the traffic between virtual networks and virtual network peering. Summary. The main takeaways: Azure Virtual Network peering allows for connection of virtual networks in a hub and spoke topology. There are two types of peering, regional and global. Regional peering connects virtual networks in same region. Global peering connects virtual networks in different region. Network traffic between peered virtual networks is private and kept on Azure backbone network. You can configure Azure VPN Gateway in the peered virtual network as a transit point to access the resources in another network. Network security groups can be applied to block allow access between virtual networks when configuring virtual network peering. That's great. Thanks for watching this video. Let's connect on the another session. Thank you.